What brings you to Miami?
Well, I've actually been here for 3 weeks now. I've been working with the Miami City Ballet on a new work. It's actually the most recent work to follow the creation of this excerpt we just saw, which was a ballet called Everywhere We Go that premiered at New York City Ballet maybe like a month and a half ago.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been in the studio, the dancers and I, working on this new work, which is a ballet set to piano concerto by a composer named Martinu. And yeah, it's been a great working process so far. So, yeah.
But this one is really quite different than your previous collaboration, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, this one doesn't involve Sufjan. It's with the music for this piece is by a composer who's dead. So
as opposed
so
to
it's a little bit of a different dynamic.
He hasn't said anything yet.
He hasn't said much to me. Yeah, it's not much of a back and forth, but yeah, I think it's still this new ballet. Every ballet is a collaboration in itself from day one, just because it's so involved with the working process with the dancers themselves. And this piece for Miami City Ballet will actually involve a visual collaborator, this artist named Shepard Ferry, who will design an art piece, a backdrop for the ballet itself. So that's sort of in the works right now. Yeah.
Great. Sufjan, you were famously not a fan of ballet. I'm going to read something from in the past. Though he was always a collaborator, but from Policy Mike, which is now, I guess, called Mike. 2 quick paragraphs. In 2001, far from the ballet world, indie artist and self-proclaimed hater of ballet, Sufjan Stevens released Enjoy Your Rabbit, and this is high praise, an impenetrable electronic album inspired by the Chinese zodiac. It brought him approximately no new fans. 4 years later, his massively successful Illinois brought him unprecedented fame. That was just about when a 26-year-old dancer and choreographer, this is a dancer who happens to be a soloist at the New York City Ballet, named Justin Peck, stepped into Balanchine's shoes at the New York City Ballet and tried to save the dance giant. Peck was looking for inspiration. He found it when he heard a string quartet arrangement of Stevens' bizarre old record. In 2012, he, with the help of the once reluctant Stevens, premiered The Year of the Rabbit. And the rest leads us to here. Right. What did you think when he called you?
He actually emailed me and I didn't respond.
There's a theme here.
It was such an eloquent solicitation, and it's and bringing sort of like elaborating on the collaborative history in ballet and Balanchine, Stravinsky, blah blah blah. And I think at the time I was touring and I was like, I can't handle this. This is ridiculous. But he was asking to use music that already. Well, he was just saying I'm interested in your work, and I'm always looking for living songwriters and musicians and composers. It was just a really very, very generous and kind solicitation, but there was something about my misunderstanding of the ballet world that kept me from responding until a year later when he actually just went ahead and started choreographing.
Was he stalking you on Facebook and stuff?
No, he was going to make the ballet with or without me, right?
Well, I started kind of experimenting with a couple of the pieces in a really informal way at the New York Choreographic Institute, which is an affiliate of New York City Ballet, and it's just more or less just like a laboratory where choreographers can go and just play around with music, and just provides the resources for choreographers, like dancers and space and time, which is kind of hard to come by when you're just starting out. So it's actually a big resource.
And anybody can use it?
No, you have to apply, and there's actually usually like between 70 or 80 applicants a year, and then they take about 6 to 8. So I kind of started there, and eventually the director of New York City Ballet, Peter Martins, expressed a lot of interest in the work I was setting to this piece of music, and he offered me my first major commission with New York City Ballet, and he was like, "You can do whatever you want with this, but I know you've been working a lot with this music by this composer, and if you want, you could continue to pursue that." And I said, "Yeah, I would like to develop this further, and there's a lot more to this music than just the few little kind of pieces I've been toying with here and there." And so at that point, I got in touch with him, and I forced him to come to the ballet, and then we just met afterwards and kind of discussed the possibility, and at that point, you were kind of open to it, I think.
What ballet was it?
This became a ballet called Year of the Rabbit.
No, but what was the one he
I
first
brought
met?
It was Agon.
Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even remember.
I didn't like ballet until I saw Agon.
And what? It's not a bad place to start, actually. But what about it? What about it turned you on? What?
Sorry, I'm breathing into my mic. It just felt like there was a kind of purity to it, to the architecture, and it felt really. It felt undated, and it felt like kind of subliminal dance form that was it was ballet, but it was transcendent of the trappings of classical ballet. There's no narrative, really. There's really no costuming. There's no backdrop or anything, and it just was very, very vacant in a lot of ways. And and then I saw the other Balanchine black and white ballets and started to understand that, and through that was able to then really understand the vernacular and come to appreciate other story ballets and narrative ballets as well. So
I'm sort of stuck on your concept of when you're thinking about the ballet being dated, and I just wonder how is it the lack of narrative, or is it the cleanliness of structure of the
you
structure?
mean Agon specifically?
Yeah, because you said it wasn't dated. That was the first thing you said about
it is dated, I guess, in a lot of ways because it's modern, in modernism. But it felt like just fully realized, and it's a seminal piece, so it's it's just sort of unparalleled in so many ways, and it is extremely evocative and emotional and athletic and fun and competitive, but without any of the kind of obvious sort of characteristics of ballet. The emoting, the
Pantomime gestures.
Pantomime.
All that. Yeah.
The romance and the fighting and all that's gone. He's extinguished all that, and yet it is still all that. It's still like the cosmic story of mankind or whatever.
Yeah. So when he started to choreograph to your music, I assume it became somehow no longer quite your music and his interpretations?
Oh yeah.
And you were okay with that?
Oh yeah. I mean, by the time the music got in his hands, it had already filtered through numerous collaborators to be distilled into the string quartet. And I had worked with all these composers and arrangers and kind of helped to produce that project. But then it became this other thing for string orchestra for New York City Ballet. And by then, it was not, I had disassociated from it so completely. I couldn't even explain, musical decisions at all because it was over 10 years old at that point. Or no, it was really old, about 10 years old at that point. So
you've talked before about letting go and when in producing stuff that comes out of you, and then letting go to watch to have other people perform it or have other people interpret it.
Yeah.
When he was choreographing, did you participate in that?
Not so much. I mean, he's really open. He'll invite me into the studio, and he's open to my opinions, but they're really not very.
Do you get ignored a lot, or?
Because
This is time for true statements here.
he has a vast education. He understands the sort of the more comprehensive story of ballet, and he knows what's been done and what hasn't been done. Whereas I'm just coming at it from, someone who watched like Michael Jackson music videos as a kid. So I don't know.
Could have been Fred Astaire. So when you have to let go, when he's writing with you, in this case it was already done, so you were interpreting, right?
Right. Yeah.
And were you interpreting, or were you moving in time and space to music that happened to be there?
No, it was I'm a very musically driven choreographer, so it's very much focused on the music itself, and the structure of that music kind of becomes a blueprint for creating the choreography for me. So, but there were definitely some tweaks we made in the score itself in order to better adapt it for the ballet. There were certain transitions that had to be added, and we went through several phases of what the arrangement was going to be, things like that. But yeah, I guess I'm very musically driven, but at the same time, when it comes to the choreography, I'm also open to the back and forth with Sufjan. And I actually remember I'm thinking now, I remember when I completed the ballet and we were running it for maybe a few weeks, and then all of a sudden it was maybe 3 days until the premiere, and then I get this email from Sufjan, and it's just an extensive notes about what needs to be changed, what needs to be altered here and there. And I was like, why didn't you send this to me 2 weeks ago? But actually they all were extremely insightful thoughts on the choreography, and we ended up making a lot of last minute changes that I think now looking back on it was for the better, and I'm really glad to have that extra set of eyes in the studio. So.
The collaborativeness of a ballet presentation of a ballet is kind of stunning, and I watched you with a dancer. I watched you critique a dancer dancing something you would choreograph, and I think you would drive me nuts if I were the dancer, because you kept. I mean, not that you weren't right or that you weren't wonderful or whatever, but you sort of looked at her, and she looked pretty good the first time. And you even said so. That was really nice. But and then you started saying, and then there's this movement and that movement, and she'd sort of do it and say, yeah, okay, that's nice. And then you say, and then there's something else, and then something else, and then something else. Do you ever stop?
I don't think I ever stop. I think it's always a process. I think it's, the nice thing about dance as an art form, ballet as an art form, is that it's the strive for perfection. And of course you can't obtain that, you can't achieve that. So it's this constant, almost daily practice of trying to reach that. And the same goes with creation of choreography. It's the same thing for me. So when I get into the studio and I'm working with the dancers, it's a similar strive for that perfection. So.
And your training is classical. You're a soloist at the New York City Ballet, and your dance is classical. But the choices you've made in your choreography are certainly not classical music. And I do want to talk about the range of Sufjan's music. But why didn't you pick more classical music to interpret?
Well, I think that there's a wide range of music that I work with. I think, the nice thing about being a choreographer is that there's a number of projects to always be working on, and so there are times when I'm working on ballets that involve more classical music, but I think that, the reason why I really wanted to bring Sufjan on initially as a collaborator was because I always felt that he had this innate ability to write danceable music, which to me is a different sort of genre or category than classical music. So it's not necessarily limited to classical music, but certain pieces, it's a very finite amount of pieces of music that could work for dance. And I think the first thing I heard of his was the Illinois album, years before. And I remember being kind of taken by his ability to orchestrate so many different things and assemble these songs. And then I sort of stopped listening to his music for a few years. And I remember being up in Saratoga Springs on tour with New York City Ballet, and I was sitting outside listening to WNYC, and there was just like randomly a segment featuring the string quartet named Oso, and they played a bunch of these string arrangements of Sufjan's Enjoy Your Rabbit album, and that's where it sort of like reawakened this interest in his music, and from that point I had this like immediate response to it, and I said I want to work with this music. I want to set movement to this music, and so a few years later I started to work with it.
Wonderful. Maybe Sufjan, you could talk a little bit about how you got to where you are in music, because in preparation for this, thanks to YouTube and iTunes and everything else, I listened to a number of things, and I would highly recommend to all of you from the Illinois. You must really love puns. The Illinois. And that's not just the Miami pronunciation of Illinois. It's actually how he writes it. The cut, Mary Todd Lincoln, Mary.
I don't even remember. It was so long ago.
Mary Todd went insane, but she had very good reasons. And I asked you before whether the very good reasons were the loss of her son, the distance of her husband, or the Civil War.
Or mercury poisoning.
Her mercury poisoning. That must be it. That cut also has John Wayne Gacy on it, which I thought went sort of in a different direction. But there were also songs there, not in that same album, but songs like Futile Devices with hopelessly romantic lines like, "It's been a long, long time since I memorized your face." That's a really different songwriter, it seems to me, than Year of the Rabbit. Explain yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I have a very vast sort of wide palette and lots of interests, but my training and my learning is very narrow. So I learned the oboe as a kid, and I played in orchestras and bands, and that's basically was my introduction to music, romantic music and classical music and Baroque music and Percy Grainger, and that's the kind of music that I grew up with. But then when I got to college, I started writing songs, and I find that then I gave up the oboe. And I found that my whole career has been this weird kind of like trying to understand like my voice as a songwriter, but then having to sort of like negotiate all this other information, this education, which is all about romance, and kind of, there's kind of a transcendent nature to classical music that isn't inherent in folk music. And folk music is about my personal narrative and my story and my feelings and all that kind of stuff.
Do you still sing on stage?
I still sing, yeah. I mean, I'm primarily known as a songwriter, and I think that's anyone who's interested in my music is probably drawn to me as a singer. But I personally hate my voice, and I've always hated singing. And I've really struggled with it, and I didn't.
You're a psychiatrist for things like that.
I know.
They
I didn't-
specialize in.
I didn't grow up singing. I grew up playing the oboe, which is an extremely obnoxious and repressed instrument. And, and there's just so much cranial pressure. And by the time I got to college and learned the guitar and started singing, I was kind of tone deaf, and so I had to really discover my voice and how to sing in tune, and it's still a struggle to this day. And all this training as a classical musician and playing the oboe and making oboe reeds seemed wasted. But I do think that it does still rear its ugly head in my music, and I think I think a lot of the Enjoy Your Rabbit and the really symphonic stuff is informed by all that stuff, the classical music.
Where was the shot?
This was actually, we shot this at Jerome Robbins' home. So it was a nice tie, I think, to the history of New York City Ballet. It's his home out on Long Island. So we actually went out there and did a shoot of this. And the choreography is not directly, it's not sequentially in the ballet itself. It was a bunch of different movements that we assembled, and we shot it early on in the process of making the ballet. And I guess I should just mention that these films, I wanted to spark an interest in viewers, and so I wanted to take this approach by creating these almost like movie trailer-like kind of teaser films to set up the ballets themselves. That could spark an interest, but at the same time exist as short films on their own. So that's the background behind these two.
And tell me, was it successful?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, and how? What?
I mean, I don't know all the statistics, but I mean, I think
Anecdotally?
artistically it was successful, I think.
Is she wearing point shoes on the beach?
She's not. She's barefoot, which is really dangerous. But no.
So the idea then is to get somebody to watch that on YouTube.
Yeah, it's presented on a different platform than it's presented online, so it reaches a wider audience and.
But the
different
point is
demographic.
to bring them to the actual performance,
Right,
or to
yeah.
enjoy it as
Both,
it is.
I think.
So are you jealous that it's not your music? I didn't realize it wasn't.
No,
your
it's
music.
his music. It's just not.
It is
from
my
the
music, but
actual
it's from
ballet.
It's from something else.
something else.
I see. Okay, so that
I'm
keeps
not
you
jealous.
quiet. The third clip we have is also from Year of the Rabbit.
The third clip is an excerpt from Everywhere We Go.
Okay.
Oh, you have this? Which movement?
Last movement.
Oh, crazy.
This is the finale movement of Everywhere We Go.
You showing the whole thing?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
He's embarrassed.
I'm
No,
not
it's actually kind of an interesting movement because it's an assembly of many different parts from the ballet itself, and I kind of thought of this movement as like when you have a dream and then you wake up from that dream and you want to explain the dream to someone who's close to you, and it becomes a sort of like sort of practical sequential explanation of what went on. So that was the whole idea behind this movement. So it's I think it's comprehensive in a way.
When was that done?
That was May 8th.
That was 2 months ago.
But so you finished then?
I wrote the music kind of just a few months before that. Yeah.
And so when you look at it now, do you want to? Since we recorded everything you said to each other, I'll find out later. But do you want to share with us what you were looking at? What did you see?
Just now,
Yeah.
we were commenting on some of the late entrances.
Oh, yeah. We were just critiquing like everything that was
So-
going on.
I was hoping for some heavy theory here.
Well, they all die at the end. We now know. Everybody dies.
Sooner or
It's
later.
one constant.
I mean, what interests me about Justin's choreography is that it's ultimately meaningless, and
Said it in the best way.
no, but it's still so vital, so full of life and exuberance, and it feels like extremely interpretive and evocative and moving, but it doesn't seem to be so weighed down with conceptualization.
Yeah, I mean, it's really mundane. It's if you look at the last thing that they do there, they're catching each other, right? They're in this sustained, energetic susu position, releve position. They're on their toes, and then they fall one by one. That's just taken. You know, I had an experience recently where someone really close to me got really lightheaded and they fainted, and I was just right there at the right time to catch them, and that just became then this ballet.
So you mean that it's mundane and that it comes from your life, not that it's,
Yeah, but it's-
ordinary.
It comes from your spinal cord, like those instincts. They're not from your brain. When when you're shocked or you touch something that's really hot, that motion is not thought.
Yeah.
It's instinct, and I think a lot of his choreography is that it resides in that space.
Wonderful. I'm going to open the floor for questions from the audience, but before I do, we are in a young art space, and I think I need to ask you about young artists and advice and experience. You mentioned a free space or a space where you could that you could explore in New York, that even though it's not entirely free, it's at least space where choreographers can experiment. What are the kinds of things like that you think would add to Miami's art scene?
Well, I think, I only know from my own experience, and I work in classical art form. But I think it's a really high maintenance art form in a lot of ways, in that you need a lot of support to get started. So for me, to make dances, I needed studio space, I needed dancers who were willing to collaborate with me, I needed music, I needed time. And those are kind of like hard things to come by at first. So I think that the Young Arts program can provide that sort of foundation for a lot of aspiring artists to go on and do greater things. So.
And the promotion that you've done has been enabled by internet, I assume. But is that stuff you've done, or is that an organization behind you?
I mean, there always has to be funding for that sort of stuff. I mean, with these two videos, I was fortunate to have the support of New York City Ballet, and they have a media department there, but that's a similar sort of situation, that there needs to be some sort of support in order to carry out a vision like that, which can, I think, potentially be found here. So that's great. Yeah.
And you're not giving advice.
Advice?
I noticed, yes.
I mean, I think, I don't know, I always felt like it's just important to put the most time and the most effort into whatever it is you're doing. I think there's not, shortcuts are not the solution. So I think just being 110% committed to what you're doing is the most important thing, and having a clear vision to carry out, making sure those two things are in place, and then you have a good starting point. So.
Do you want to add before I go to the floor?
No, I agree with that. I mean, all the hours I spent making oboe reeds taught me, I really do think it informed me about, discipline and hard work, and, these Sisyphean tasks that we feel like have no end and no purpose, but you just have to be really focused and have an objective and stay on task. hard work.
You feel your music is as instinctive as his dance?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't think conceptually. I don't have enough sort of like scholastic, knowledge about music and composition. So a lot of what I write is instinct.
It felt like it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, Jordan. Be careful. She's with the press. She's liable to print.
Just, Justin, you said that you thought Sufjan's music was danceable. Can you say what makes music danceable to you? What do you mean?
I mean, there's things like has to have a pulse, has to kind of like spark an instinctual reaction to get up and move a little bit. I think has to be challenging in a way structurally, and but beyond those kind of straightforward ideas, I think it's something sort of intangible. It's hard to describe. It's probably different for everyone. What I find danceable, the type of music that I want to work with is not necessarily the same music that the next choreographer wants to work with, and it's. If you look at like Mark Morris, he's someone who said, Arvo Part, he would never choreograph Arvo Part because he thinks it's undanceable, whereas like Christopher Wheeldon loves Arvo Part and finds it completely danceable. So it's specific, I think, to every different choreographer too.
Boris? Why don't you just wait for the microphone so everybody can hear you?
Justin, have you considered, in terms of experimenting and even legacy, crossing over also to other disciplines, the visual arts, the performance, from where you are at this point? How flexible you think that is, or you would do if at all? Is it something you have considered, especially when you're very young, but in terms of legacy, experimenting into other disciplines and perhaps installation, performance, and crossing over
in terms
to
of my own work, like what I want to be doing.
Since
I'm definitely interested in collaborating on different projects. I don't think I would make quite an extreme jump at this point to go from creating dances to creating canvas paintings, for me at least. I think, but I'm always sort of like drawn to these just different sort of side projects here and there. I mean, the most recent thing I worked on was with a design company, and we produced an iPad app that is this interactive choreography app where the user can actually create their own movement and their own dances based on these sequences that I've developed. And so that's sort of like moving away from how we traditionally view dance, which is in traditional theater, and you go to the theater and you watch for an hour and a half and then you leave. Like, this is something where you can pick up and play with for 3 minutes and then put it down, and then get on the subway and then, or whatever, the bus in Miami, and use it,
I was thinking
and
more conventional, perhaps on performance sort of thing, or through mixed media. But is that thinking also advice to young people? You think you're more free these days to break the mold, especially when you're in the establishment, to experiment with other areas and not be labeled into choreography or dance, or being more difficult to move out of?
I think that there's definitely the potential for that, especially amongst my generation. I think we're all open to working on more experimental projects, and also I think collaboration is a big part of the upcoming generation. So I think like cross-pollination between the art forms is really vital this day and age.
Both of you. Go ahead.
Or what about just modern dance? Like in New York, there's like uptown and downtown.
Right.
Downtown dance is like a thing of its own, and they don't, they're very different languages.
Yeah, it's almost like they're almost entirely different. Like they're almost different art forms.
Would you ever
themselves.
cross those boundaries?
I think I would. I think if the right time came and the right project came about, I would definitely consider that.
So both of you have used electronic technology. I didn't know you had done the app. Is that available?
It is available. It's through a company called Twice.
Oh,
Two
yeah, Patsy Tar.
W.
Yeah.
Patsy Tar, yeah.
Yeah. The wonderful,
WICE.
the wonderful Patsy Tar.
And it just got released this week, actually, and it's there's a feature in the New York Times about it this week, so all the information's on there.
Terrific.
Found online.
So how is that? How does technology either disrupt dance in the way that or music in the way that you lived it, or enable participation, enable engagement by the audience?
I mean, I think it does both those things, for sure. I think that there's something lost in, when you see dance presented on something like an iPad. It's interesting and it's a new way of experiencing dance, but at the same time, there's something lost in that it's not live performance. And I've always found that dance captured on film or on camera or whatever kind of becomes diluted, and it's not the same experience as going to the theater and seeing a live performance and hearing the music live, things like that. So, but it can
And
reach
is that
a new
because
audience.
that's your habit, or because of the tension and danger of live performance?
I mean, that's just what I believe in. I've always felt that live performance is the top for me, in terms of experiencing art and dance, and that's how I prefer to experience it.
And in your music?
Well, my music has always resided in this mass manufacture distribution through
Yeah.
technology. So that's kind of where it resides. So I'm completely comfortable with that, and that's how I write and record. I've always worked on laptop computers, and I composed the whole score on Sibelius, which is a software program. But that's what really draws me to dance and ballet in particular, is because it's so transient. It's such a transcendent sort of experience, but it's fleeting. It's just an experience here and now, and you can't capture it. Even these videos do no justice at all to the experience of being in the room. And I think that's what's really exciting about it. For me, I've been duplicated, multiplicity on the internet, and it sort of loses its mystery, I think.
Did you ever see the videos that Kaplan did of Cunningham Dance?
Oh yeah.
Because those I think
That's as close, as
Yeah.
I'll ever get to Cunningham, and I'm really grateful for that. But it still is nothing compared to even seeing his company, near the end of his life or after he died. And that's that experience will reside with me forever. Whereas those videos are they feel like newsprint or newspaper. There's something very historical about it. It doesn't reside in. It doesn't touch me. But it's amazing that we have that.
and they really were so different than the static camera that simply takes in the whole stage. Other comments, questions? Sue, why don't you wait for the mic?
Justin, you've worked with different companies and different dancers, and I'm wondering if you could tell us what it's like working with the Miami City Ballet dancers.
Sure. Yeah. I mean,
That's a setup by the chairman
Well,
of the board of the correct answer, in case you were going to give another one, is
I was actually just going to segue right there, because I think that there's this tremendous resource that we all have here in this community, and that's the Miami City Ballet. And they have an amazing season coming up this year, with such a wide array of different works, different choreographers, different pieces of music, and I would just highly encourage everyone to go see it and see a lot of it, because I've always found that dance, I think it's a little bit intimidating at first, but the more you see it, the more you develop a taste for it, and the more you really appreciate it. And it's not unlike developing a taste for something like wine. So it's the same sort of process of You acquire a taste and you figure out what you like and what you don't like, and there's a nice range of ballets that the company's presenting, and it's an amazing company, and this is my second time coming to collaborate with them, and there's something really special about the dancers. There's a real sense of camaraderie and real like kind of positive nature and a musicality and an athleticism and an eagerness to collaborate on new work, which I think is for me is the most important.
Yeah.
And so it's been a joy to work.
Have you worked with them, Sophia?
No.
So can we arrange this?
Yeah.
Maybe you know somebody who can help you.
Maybe we can set that up.
I'm a big fan of the company as well. I mean, I guess I've only seen them perform once or twice.
You've seen them twice, yeah.
And a lot of the rep is similar to New York City Ballet, but without the historical baggage and the ghost of Balanchine. So so it's exciting. It was exciting for me to see.
I was actually
Sorry.
I was actually going to comment that it really is wonderful to have this pair of artists who are so collaborative, so open-minded, and so opinionated here with us. So welcome to Miami, and come back anytime you want.
Thank you.
Hey, Alberto.
Oh, there's one more question. Sorry. Is that so on? Why don't you shout it?
This is for Mr. Stevens. Your music really has to be some of the most emotional and personal I've ever had the pleasure to hear. And you mentioned that your music is, as you say, your story. So I really have to ask, how much of the more narrative songs are really based on your own life, or are they just your way of storytelling?
Wait a minute. What is the question?
You might want to sit down for this one.
A lot of your songs are just incredibly narrative, and I have
Narrative.
to ask, are they based on your life, or are they just your way of storytelling?
I mean, there's an awful lot of autobiography there. I mean, I was trained as a fiction writer, and I remember one of the first things they teach you is write what you know. So everything's based on fact, but then obviously it becomes skewed and transforms into fantasy. So it is fantasy fiction, but a lot of it's based on my life. So, I mean, that's generalization, but yeah. Thanks. Does that answer?